and how we create simple graphical user interface. But what we did in the previous lesson was only an interface. We learned how we dividing windows using the panes with the different organizations and so on and so forth. And we learned how we creating buttons, text box, putting the labels, but all these stuff is just, what about now or what? But all these stuff is just an interface, doesn't do anything. What's important for us is the things behind clicking buttons, the thing behind moving the mouse and so on. So when you're entering some information, you would like to do some calculations, save some information, retrieve some information, so on and so forth. So this is what's done by event-driven programming. So last week meeting was only about creating the, let's say, the interface only. But today we will talk about the actual programming to see a result and interacting with a user input. Okay? So in this example, they said, let's assume the user enter a loan amount. So you would like to get some loan from the bank. So this is entered by a user. And then user could be an employee on the bank. So I said, ask the customer how much amount you would like to get loan from the bank. And it will enter الانnual interest, الفائدة اللي حق القرض. And then it is going to done within how many years. Those is going to be entered by a user. Okay. After clicking the calculator, some calculations supposed to be happened behind this windows to retrieve the monthly amount and the total payment. Okay. To accomplish this task, we have to use what is called an event-driven programming. So we have to write some code to respond to the button clicking. So whenever you click the buttons, you will get some response. Okay. There is difference between an event-driven programming and the procedural. The procedural, like what we used before, not even within in Java, even for C#, Python, like in Java it's object-oriented, but other procedural order coding, it's go by order, line by line. But in Java is object-oriented. So for the procedural programming, it is go in order, line by line. But in an event-driven, it's activation of events. So you do some action and something will happen. An event can be defined as a type of signal. So something happened, and something happened by a user, and there is some response, okay, to it. An event generated by external user actions, as what I just said, such as a button click, mouse movement, mouse click, or a keyboard clicking. So whenever a user do something, some action will happen. And even in class or classes, the parent class is an event object, and then we having an event. So an event, it could be action event, usually for buttons. This is what we will see today. It could be input event that you get it from a user, either coming from a mouse or from a key, which is a keyboard, and a word event. For today, we are not going to talk about our window event. There is something called an event handler, which is the node that is going to handle any action by source, but it's not always a node. Sometimes not, sometimes something else. But it's this handler. We'll see what it is. It's response to button click. You need to write the code, process the button clicking. For example, so here, if you're having a button, this is called a source object. Whenever you fire an action, sometimes you click it, sometimes you go over it. It's not always clicking the buttons. There's different action with the buttons. So you're doing an action with what? A source object. An event will happen depending on your action, either clicking, moving, going over something, and then there is a handler, or it's called also listener. The handler creates an action, okay? Creates an action of the buttons. It's supposed to contain a method doing the process of an event. So who will calculate, for example, in the example we saw it at the beginning, the calculation of the loan amount, it is going to happen by a handler, okay? It is going to calculate the amount of loan. Now, to use any graphical user interface, we said we will have a source object, we will have a handler. But to do that handler, you need to do two things actually. You need to create a handler, and then you need to register it. So we said we have a source. مثال حقه قلنا you can have the buttons. Then the handlers, which is going to do some action. For example, اللي هي calculate the amount of loan. To do this handler, you need to do two things. Create a handler and register. Okay? So what we mean about this? You need to create a handler object as an instance of corresponding event handler interface. How we define it? JavaFX defined unified handler interface. There is an interface called event handler. So this is already a library or interface with the JavaFX. You don't need to create this one, an event handler. What's the argument of this event handler interface? Is going to take T, where T is a generic type of a sub-type of an event. Do you remember before? We use something as a generic type for a data type. Does anyone remember which letter we used for the generic data type? E. Exactly. So with E before we use it to say it's integer, double, string. But here T represents a generic type for a subtype of an event. That means we will see now there are more than one type of event. We will see it soon. So an event can have more than one type. We need to define it here. And then we need to use extended event. Okay? This interface, an event handler has one important method for us called handle. And it has its get E, which is a handler, as with a generic type of handler. Do you remember in the previous class, to create, we already go over this. We said to create a graphical user interface, your class supposed to extend what? Do you remember from the previous class? We're supposed to extend which class? Application, you're right. And then an application has a method, which is we have to override it. Which method? The start. Good, Lujan. So in the previous class, on the previous meeting, we already learned how we're creating a class that's going to extend the application, and it has one important method that we're going to override, which is the start. Today, we're going to implement an event handler because it's interface. So we're going to implement an event handler. And the methods that we're going to focus on, and we always going to work on it, is called handler. Okay? So the first step, create a handler. The first step is create a handler. The second step is register this handler. The handler object must be registered by who? By a source object. الريجستريشن على اساس ان احنا نسجل register لهذا الهاندلر with that source object. There is a different method to do this, and it's always choose depending on an event type. So مثلا لو كانت الايفنت تايب شيء يختص بالكليك وحابين ان احنا نعملها بالكليك, we will see a list now. We're supposed to use something match with it. method يكون match معها. يعني في البداية راح نختار التايب اللي حق الايفنت اعتمادا على الاكشن اللي مطلوب ان هي تنعمل. بعد كذا بالسورس لازم نعمل ريجستريشن الى الميثودز اللي راح نختارها راح تكون ايضا معتمدة على الايفنت تايب. Okay. So what we just said, that first we will create the handler depending on the subtype of the event. Later we need to register the handler using the right method. How we choose the method? Depending on the event type again. For example here, if we are doing action event, we're supposed to use sit on action. If it's something about a mouse pressed event, we'll use sit on mouse pressed. If it's a keyboard, it's going to sit on the keyboard. We'll see list now. This table shows an event type with a registration method. فمثلا الآن أنا قسمتهم إلى 3 areas. So the first area, it's deal with the source coming from the button text, but it's all an actions event. The second box, which is the green, it's a node scene. It could be node and a scene, but it's the most important things here. The event type is the mouse event. And the purple box is a key event. So let's go over them. If a user would like to do click button, this is the most used one. Okay. If you would like to click on buttons, what is the source object from where? What are you going to do? You're going to click on buttons. So source is going to be button. What is going to happen? We're going to have an action event. So this is a type, an event type. Depending on an event type, we will choose a registration method. So what's the registration method here? Sit on action. The sit on action can take an argument, or it could be created at the beginning without an argument. So the argument, if you would like to take it, is going to be event handler And inside it, the argument inside an event handler, this is what is important here, is the action event. The press enter text, enter in a text, it's also actions, and it has similar registration method. الكليك التشيك or uncheck الراديو buttons إذا كانت عندنا اختيارات. Also we're going to use the same registration methods. Select from the item from the combo box. We also will use the same registration. What's Lujane? Can you hear me now? Do you hear me, guys? Okay, good. If you don't really get it, we will see an example and it will be more clear for you guys, okay? Okay. What about now? Now it's much better, Qadir, right? It's clear. Okay, good. The other part is taking care of the mouse event. So if you press the mouse, release, click, enter, exit, move the mouse, or drag the mouse, all of those has their own event registration. So you see here, sit on action, it's used on most of, it is similar for most of the action event. But for a mouse, for example, each action or each user action has or associated with a different event registration method, similar with the key. So, for example, this is we'll see more, or we'll see the example in detail soon. But I just bring a sentence here for those who still maybe don't get what's the idea of a handler, a registration. So first, you know how we're creating a class. We said class, we put the name of the class. So this is the name of the class. You create this class. Okay? Then you're supposed to use implements, event handler. Why implements? Because an event handler is an interface. Here, between those brackets, we're supposed to put an action event. So in the first example, if we're using the click, it's going to be action event. If we're using a mouse, it's going to be mouse event. If we're going to use a key, it's going to be a key event. So let me highlight it with different. So this is an action event. This is the one here. Oh, sorry, that is so dark. Okay, so the action event is here. Then after that, we get to define or declare a handler. So first, we define the class. Second, we will create an instance with the type that the class that we just created. You create this OK handler class. Then you get to create an instance of it using the constructor. And last things, we get to register. How you get to register it? See here, we use sit on action. So sit on action, this is the one here. So this is short. So how we can do handling events? Again, let's summarize what we learned so far. الآن احنا عندنا بعض الكومبوننت او النود اللي راح تكون موجوده في الجرافيكال يوزر انترفيس، صح؟ هذه النودز او حتى لو ما كان في نودز بس الويندوز نفسها ممكن نحن راح نسميها السورس. لما تعبر عليها بالماوس، لما تضغط عليها، لما تعمل اكشن، هنا المفروض تكون فيها ردة فعل. مين اللي راح يتعامل معاها؟ شيء اسمه الهاندلر، هو اللي راح يتعامل. انت ايش راح تعملي بناء على هل انت ضغطتي، هل انت حركتي الماوس، هل انت ضغطتي كيبورد معينه. هنا راح يكون في هاندلر يقول لك انت ايش المفروض تعملي. هل انت المفروض تعملي بعض الحسابات، تغير الشكل، تغير اللون. So you need to create it and define what you have to do. الآن على أساس إن حنا نعرف هذا الهاندلر في 3 طرق. الطريقة الأولى راح تكون شوية مفصلة، الثانية مختصرة بشكل شوية أقل، الثالثة مختصرة بطريقة أكثر. So now, what I just said, that we have the graphical user interface, we have a source node, and then we need to do some action based on movement, like clicking or whatever. So we need to create a handler that is going to tell us what's the right action. Calculation, changing color, moving something. There is 3 ways. Either of them is correct or all of them are correct. The first one has the details, the second one less details, and the last one is the most simplest one. Okay? The inner class handler, it is going to do 3 things. Defining the inner class. So we're going to define the class. Second, we're going to create an instance. And third, we're going to register the handler. So the inner class will do A, the B, and the C. All of them in details. The second part, the anonymous inner class, will try to combine the A and the B together and put them in one step. Using Lambda expressions, will try to combine all of them together to make it as simple as possible. Okay, so what's the difference between those 3 ways? Is making this is from details. So details, less details, and less details, but they are doing the same task. So let's see the inner class. What's an inner means? When we say inner, we use it before when you're having, for example, the inner loop. So what's an inner class mean? We have the definition in front of you. So what's an inner class? Yes, so it's going to be nested class. And what's nested class mean? Class inside class. Okay? So we will have class inside a class. Okay? What's the advantage of it? Sometimes you can use it in the inner class to make it, to simplify some work. So how we can use an inner class? See here in this example. So we have class test and class A. Class test and class A. In the first one, you see we're starting the class of test and we close it. So this is the class whole by itself. We open parentheses and we close it. And then we start the class A by itself. In the other case, which is case B, we open a test, we don't close it, but then we create another class, which is A, then we close a test. So A is going to be inside a test. And this is the example. We have the outer class. When it's going to finish, it's going to finish here. Inside it, we're going to create an inner class, which has also method for an inner class, and it has some data, and then it's called another method. But this, it is going to be inside. So this is the inner class here. It's going to be inside the outer class. Why we explain this? Because we're going to use it now for الhandler. الآن هي الفكرة. We need to understand what's an inner class because we're going to use it now. Okay. Now I need you to refresh your mind about what we studied in the previous lesson. For those who remember, we had couples of layers, or not, let's say layers, like level when we creating the graphical interface. So we having 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what are those inside here? Does anyone remember? You missed one, Ahmed. So first a node. After a node, what we have after a node? Yes, the node or active. Good, Bushra. Pane. After the pane, no, not the stage, Isa. One more. A node, a pane, then scene, right. And the last one is the stage. Okay, good. So this is, I just would like to make sure you remember what we talked about last week. So do you remember then how we creating a class for using JavaFX? First, we extend the application. Second, we override the stage. We're supposed to do couples of things here. We're creating a node. Yes, it's the theater, but it is the last step, so we're having a node, a pane, scene, then the stage, which is a theater. You said it before a scene. So here we're going to create a node, the stage, and all these stuff. After that, so you see here they said ... That means the things that we did it in the previous meeting. After that, what's important for us here? After we create, I bring this to remind you what we did in the previous class. Okay, so for example, we're creating a button called BT OK. So now we create a node. Good. Now we need to do some action. So this is going to start in main methods, display it. So now we will create a class called OKHandle class. You're going to write this class. Where are you going to write it? Here. So you're supposed to take care of this. You're going to create, or you're going to define an instance called handler1 with the type a new OKHandler class that you create a class of it here. And remember, it's going to be inner class. So we're having the stage, the start, and we're having your class, and then this is supposed to be inside it, okay? We'll see the example in NetBeans, so you it will be in a real example soon. So you create an OK handler class, which is this one. You defined an instance called handler1. You invoked the constructors, 0 constructors. After that, what you need to do you remember the 3 steps, A will B will C? The first one defined the class. So this is A. Defined the inner class. B, see you here. Defining the inner class. B, creating an instance. C, register a handler. So we create or we define the inner class A. B, we create an instance. What's the third thing? ايش هي الصيغة الثالثة؟ A, define the class. هذه أول خطوة. B, create an instance. And C, register. Good, قدير. So C, register. How are we going to register it? We use the appropriate method, which is a set on action because we're using the buttons here. Okay? So this is for OK buttons. We will do the same things for cancel. So here is just highlight the things that I just explained. So first here, you creating here the inner class, you define it, create a handler, and then register the handler. Inside the class that you created, which is called OK handler class here, it is going to implement an event handler and get an action event depending on an event type. لو كانت mouse أو key راح تكون different. Okay, so now the most important things we override what? The handle method. This is what we said at the beginning. You're going to implement an event handler. The event handler interface already have a handle method, but we have to override it to meet our requirements. So to override it is going to be public void handle, and inside it, a type action event is similar to what you're having here. Action event E, you can do whatever you like. In this case, we just print OK buttons clicked. Any question? Okay, so let's see an example. The same example, لكن راح نشوفه بالنثings, okay? Let me just share screen with you guys. Okay. So this is the example we just saw. So first you have to import the necessary library. Then we create, so this is your class. You call it whatever you like. Extended application. This is we learned from the previous class. Then we going to create a node, button OK, we button cancel, and we put them OK and cancel. Here is just organize it using, we having a bin, we having a scene, we having a stage. All these steps from the previous lesson. Okay? So let's see what we can get out of this. If I don't have a handler, so this is a handler. This is, I'm going to show you the whole different way. What do you mean memorize the library? Depending on what you are doing on. Like for example, you can have a handler For the buttons you need to remember the type حقها ان هي تكون action event. For example, so it's depending if it's not the library you're supposed to remember, Jane. You're supposed to remember the method and what's the method's going to do. So for example here بالنسبة إلى flow pane, you're supposed to remember how you're going to add a node on it. So you need to remember it gets children that add and so on. So not the library by itself, not this one here. You need to remember the methods that you're going to use it. Okay. So let me show you. Let's run this file. Okay, so let's assume I didn't do a handler. This is what I'm going to get. If I click any of those, I'm not going to get anything. Any of the buttons, I'm not going to get anything if I don't do a handlers. But now I created handlers. If I click OK, I'm going to get OK button clicked. Here, you see it down? OK buttons clicked. When I click OK. How we can do this? There's a three ways. The first way we said what it is, an inner class. You see where the class, we're creating an OK handler class inside what? You see it here? Inside the start. Unfortunately, many students is just messed up with the parentheses. So one of the easy way, if you would like to make sure which belong to which, you can just click it and open it. For example, in main here, we have it to launch. This is, we haven't add anything in this class. It's like what we studied in the previous class. So we will just close it as it is. But inside the start, we defined everything we learned in the previous lesson. Now we're going to create a class, inner class inside it. We call it whatever we like. We implement an event handler, and in this way we have to import an event here. Okay? So we implement an event handler with the appropriate type اعتمادا على الevent, and then we override the handle method for the OK. Okay? So now I create, if you remember here, I create two buttons, the OK and the cancel. The first step, define the inner class. The second step, we create an instance. And the third step, register the handler. Okay, can anyone tell me, so now if I would like to do the same thing, now في output هنا يطلع لي OK button clicked. What if I would like to do it for الcancel? الآن أنا لو ضغطت على الcancel, it's show nothing. It's just doing the OK. If I would like to do the same thing for الcancel, what I have to do? I have to create an instance, register action and run it. That's it, or I miss one step. So I define, I create an instance for cancel, and then I register it. What did I miss? The first step, which is create or define an inner class. يعني أنا الآن أقول له إن استخدم لي الcancel handler class وأنا لسه ما عرفتها. Right? Exactly, Radawi. So that's why we don't have a cancel handler class. That's why we get an error here. Okay. The solution is we need to create or define a cancel handler class. So we're going to go here and create a cancel handler class. But this is going to take so much. Can you imagine if we having 3, 4 handler? You need to create a class for each of those. What is one of the solution? To do this, there is a solution by using something called get source. إيش يعني? So we will do the same handling. When you click it, it will do something. But it's depending on the source. إذا كانت السورس جاية من البوتونز اللي حق الأوكي, you will see OK buttons clicked. If it's coming from cancel, is going to be cancel clicked. So what we can do here, we can do if a statement, we do e dot, we will use something called get source. What's the get source going to give us? It's going to tell us يعني هي راح ترجع لنا مين السورس اللي عملها؟ هل هي جايه من الاوكي بوتونز ولا من الكانسل بوتونز؟ So if إذا كانت الإي اللي هي الهاندلر that الجيت السورس dot equals to what? To البوتونز okay. إذا كان if it's coming from البوتونز okay, then the system print out OK buttons. What we can do next, we'll see else if the same things, but now we're going to say if it's what? If it's equal to what? The button cancel. If it's coming from the button cancel, what are we going to print out? We print out cancel button clicked. Okay, so let's see here. We just create one handler. So instead of creating 2 handlers, we will use only one handler. So we will creating only one class. So in this case, we can change the name لأنها ما راح تكون depending on okay. So we can call it handler class, for example. Okay. What we're going to do next? The handler class will have one handler and is going to take care, we need to register the OK buttons. If I run it now, let's see, if I run file and I click OK, I'll see OK button clicked. But when I click cancel, it didn't click or it didn't show it here. You see here in the down? Let me just make it bigger. So we're having the OK button click, but the cancel didn't show. Why? Can anyone tell me why? I create a class, which is an inner class, I define it. I create an instance, but we don't need another inner class. هنا البوينت لوجين. الآن حنا ليش عملنا الإف والإلس؟ So we don't need to creating the class more than one time. يعني إذا أنت عندك أكثر من handlers, بدل ما تعملي class, inner class, inner class, inner class, use one inner class. ومن from inside تتحكمي تقولي له من فين أنت جاي لك الكليك. For example, get the source. Okay? But we miss one thing for the cancel. What it is? Exactly. We need to register it. So we need to say put on class that sets the action will handler 1, which is we define it here. So if I run it now, Okay. If I click OK, you will see OK button clicked. If I click cancel, you will see cancel button clicked. Okay, down here on the result. So this is the benefit of using the Git source. So what's the first way to dealing with the handler? Using what? What is this method called? What is this way called? An inner class handler. So the first way is an inner class handler. We done with it. So I'm gonna to command it out. And then gonna to learn about the second one, which is anonymous inner class handler. So either هذه الآن الطرق إما تستخدم الطريقة الأولى أو الطريقة الثانية أو الطريقة الثالثة. فأنتوا هنا راح تلاحظوا للي لسه معايا إن الطريقة الأولى the first way is the longest way. So هذه هي الطريقة اللي حق الهاندلر اللي هي الانر class handler. This is the second way, which is the anonymous inner class handler. The third way اللي هي using Lambda, this is only one line actually. Okay? For now we will study about how we define the anonymous inner class handler. هنا راح نسميها anonymous. إيش فكرتها؟ الidea حقها إنه we will create all of them inside a registration. So you having the buttons, BT OK. Okay? Then we say set الأكشن اللي هي اللي عملناها هنا registration, right? Then we will bring, instead of creating, before we creating an instance using handler create new, we bring this here, new, but we do it with anonymous. We don't create any name for this class. So you see here we having a name, handler class. But now we're going to remove all this. We will bring only this part. We say new event handler action event. This is what we're going to bring here. Okay? Then we're going to open a practice. We'll see public void handler, exactly what we had it here before. If you remember, before we adding الif والelse قبل كده كان عندنا فقط خليني أرجعها مثل ما كانت. So you see it's exactly same what we had before. So before we have a public void handler and it's going to print OK. So this is exactly what we had. يعني الميثود راح تكون نفسها exactly. لكن هنا ما راح ننشئ كلاس جديدة راح تكون inner. راح نسميها anonymous. ليش؟ لأن ما عندها اسم. Because it's only new. And then you created even handler. And we're going to put it inside a registration. The second and the third way actually so interesting. يعني راح يسهلوا عليكم كثير. لكن يحتاجوا شوية attention بالنسبة إلى الأقواس. للأسف كثير من الطلاب يعني شوية they messed up مع الأقواس. يعني أنت متى ما فتحت قوس تتأكد أنك تسكره. تفتح كلاس هنا تتأكد أنك تسكره. تفتح قوس هنا تتأكد أنك تسكره. Okay? So when you use those way اللي هي second and third way, please make sure you follow how many parentheses كم قوس عندك. You open one and close one. So here, for example, the registration, you open a registration, this is the close of the registration. Then we're creating a new event handler. We open it, which is going to have a handler method, and we close it out, and we close that one. If you are working with the NetBeans, not the final exam, you're going to write it in your hand, you can do this. This is going to help you make sure you're doing it right. Okay? So this is the second way. Let's run it out. and see what it's going to give us. If I click OK, it's going to give us OK button clicked. We didn't create the cancel. We can do the same thing. مثل ما عملنا هنا ان احنا create ال else وال if and use the get source. We can bring it here as well. Okay. So let's see it in the slide. So this is the get source اللي لسه شرحناها بالexample. Okay. So instead of creating a 2 times method, we're using a get source, and this is the code. The second way, the one that we just explained, is using an anonymous inner class. So here you can see if you're having the class, so you're creating an enlarge class, and you implement an event handler, and you're having a handler methods. This is exactly the similar example like what we did. What you get to cross out, you're going to cross out the class enlarge handler will implements, and we will just leave الevent handler اللي موجودة هنا. يعني هذه اللي هنا we're going to cross this out, and then we're going to leave all the rest, وراح ناخذها ونحطها inside a set on action, which is the registration. Okay. So هذه هي الطريقة الثانية, the second way, which is using الanonymous, and we already saw that one. The third way اللي هي simplifying the event handler, راح نستخدم شيء اسمه Lambda. So what is that? And what is a Lambda expression actually, or it's how we can use it? It's a new feature for Java 8, can be viewed as an anonymous method with the simplest or shortest syntax, okay? So we'll see the following code, for example. So we're having here, this is with the anonymous inner. So this is the second way, and this is with the Lambda. Do you see how we can create it? So this is the name of the buttons, the variable name. Set on action here registration method. Then we open parentheses, we put an E, then an arrow, and we open curly brackets, and we will put the code inside it. As simple as this. So let's see it again with the NetBeans. So this was an inner class handler. Okay, we're done with it, and we're done with an anonymous inner class. We'll see the last one, which is using Lambda expression. So the button OK, it is similar. A registration method is similar, the same registration method. What is going to be different? We're going to cross out all these stuff here. كل هذه ما راح نستخدمها. A new event handler, and then override the handle method. We're going to just say E, arrow, and then you put your code between those brackets. In this case, we're just having print statement, but it can have anything. If condition, loop, whatever, all this stuff you can put it in. Yes, you can do right away. So let's see it here. Run a file. So you see here, we're just having it OK. If I have click, I cannot do it. But if I would like to create it as what we had it before, if you remember, what was our code? Remember, we're having F, then what? LE dot get, sorry, it's get it equal. So if I having E dot the source dot equal, it's supposed to be equal to what? Okay. It's going to show button OK. It's like when you're writing any code. Else, if we having the same things, but in this time we will have the cancel buttons. We would like to print cancel buttons. Okay, so we click it. You're right, brother. We need, yes, I forget this step. So we supposed to register as well cancel. So if we would like to doing it, we need to register first the buttons, and then we need to register cancel. The good idea, can you give me an idea how we can do this, Ahmed? We can create an array or list. It has the both buttons. Then when you're doing it as an action, you can use the element one by one. Okay, this is one of the idea. It could be work in another way as well, but you are right, we need to register it first. Okay, so this is the third way. For a Lambda example, we already finished it. Now we'll see an example doing a calculator. How we can do calculator, doing the add, subtract, and multiplication, and division. So we'll see this example here, calculator. Okay. In this calculator, first we're going to define a library or import a library, okay? Then we're going to create a necessary nodes and so on. So مثلا هنا we create flow pane. Do you remember what the flow pane is going to do? What's the flow pane is going to do? How it's going to look like, or how it's going to organize the node inside it. Exactly, Lujan. So, and then we're going to set الاتش gap اللي هي الهوريزونتال gap بينهم والفي gap. element هنا راح نحددها ان هي راح تكون center. Then we're going to create text field for a number 1, text field for a number 2, and one for a result. And we need to do one thing here. Since the result is not a text that a user is supposed to write anything on it, we can put, or we have to put a dot set edible false. That means the user cannot write on this text field. And here we define the size, إنه هو راح يكون السايز حقها 15 columns. Okay. Now we need to add all these node inside what? البين اللي هي نوعها flow pane. So we're going to add them, but we're going to add an addition nodes as well. اللي هي هنا we're going to use get children, add all. So we will add more than one. First we're going to create a label and we're going to add it. TF1 اللي هي الرقم الأول, we're going to put it here. Then we're going to add a label, and then we're going to add a second number. We're going to add third label, and then الريزولتس variable اللي هي تحتوي text للريزولتس اللي فيها text أو التكست اللي فيها الريزولت sorry. Okay. After that we will have buttons that is going to do different actions. So buttons for add, for subtract, for multiplication, for divisions. And then again, we will organize them inside a pen using what? Get children that add all. We'll create scene with this size. The title is going to be look like this. So before going to the handler, which is today lesson, let's see how it's going to look like. So we're having a number 1, a number 2, and then a result. I would like to try to write down here. For results, I cannot do this. Why? Because it's already disabled. Edible is false. فإحنا ما راح نقدر نكتب داخلها. Okay? So let's see now. We're having 4 buttons. Each of them will do different action. So the first buttons, which is the add, for all of them we're going to choose which way, the first, second, or third way we just explained. So is this way is the inner class, anonymous class, or Lambda? Yes, so this is going to be the third way, which is we creating a Lambda. So sit on action, here registrations. Then we said the E. What we would like to do, a TF results اللي هي التكست فايل اللي حق الريزولت. What are we going to put it inside? We're going to use a method called setText. So setText is going to write inside the result. What we're going to have inside this setText, the user when writing on a keyboard, it's not saved as a double right away. So we need to convert it. So we're using double dot, first double. From where we're going to get a number, فين راح يدخل المستخدم numbers? Inside the text اللي اسمها TF number 1. Okay? So we will get a text that's saved inside a text TF number 1, and we convert it to a double. We will do the same thing for a number that's entered inside a TF number 2, and then we will add them together. So ايش اللي راح يصير هنا? You will read from a text اللي فيها number 1 and from number 2. We will convert each of them, and then we will set, and then we will set them inside a TF result using a setText. The same thing with all buttons. The difference is only the operation. So here is a plus, minus, multiplication, and division. So let's see now the full result. We didn't test it before. So here, if a user, for example, enter 2 and 5, using an add, and you see here is going to show as a double. Doing subtractions, minus 3 minus 5. Multiplication is going to multiply them, and divide is going to divide them. Okay? So this is the calculation example. Any questions so far? Any question? What is the goal of plus at the end of expressions? This is so عصام. So حنا راح يكون عندنا you're going to have this part here. So this is the first number. This represents the first number. Plus this, which is represent the second number. This one here is just going to give it space. If you mean this one. Yeah, you're asking for this one, I believe. Let's see if we remove it, what we going to get. Let's assume, okay, we remove it. Okay, so what we're going to get? Flippal operation. So we need to flip the operation. Okay, so the purpose for it to make sure that it's going to calculate it as a double at the end. All of it together, okay? So we have to have it. To flip the operation as what explained here. Okay, so you're welcome. Hi, Sam. Okay, so now we will have another type of an event. الtype الأولى we explained it was what? So we'll learn we saw three types. The second one now we will talk about the mouse event. The one that we talked about it. It's not a button, what is called? Buttons it could be buttons, it could be text, it could be a compo. But what is the type of the event? Okay, let me remind you. You see here? The event type, action events. Okay. Could be buttons, text, radio, check, combo, whatever. But an event type is action event. Now we will learn about the mouse event. Okay. So let's back to where we were. A mouse event has couples of methods, which is hopefully clear. So you get buttons to indicate which mouse buttons has been clicked. So if you're having more than one buttons, the get buttons is going to tell you which one is it clicked by a user. So I think this is one way for the one who's asking me about the handler. I believe in using the mouse event is more right to dealing with more than one buttons. If you would like to divide them all into together, using get buttons and define it. If it's using that one, or if the mouse go over that button, do that handler instead of dividing more than one lambda مثل ما عملنا قبل شوية for each buttons. Okay. Get the click count راح يحسب لك is going to count how many times you click. Get the x وال y replace the x and the y coordinator الcoordinate اللي حق الماوس where it is actually بالنسبة إلى الsource node. So for example, if you are talking about buttons or a text file, it's going to tell you within that source node. يعني داخل نفس السورس فين مكانها. However, الثانية اللي هي الget cn x والget cn y, those is going to tell you where is the pointer inside the scene. الget screen x والget screen y, this is going to tell you where is the pointer في السكرين. Exactly. غادية. The rest is going to talk about the keyboard. هل هي if it's the alt key is pressed with an event, if it's the control key is pressed, if the multi buttons is clicked, if the shift key is pressed. يعني ايش هي keys that is pressed by a user. So those are registration methods اللي راح نستخدمهم بالنسبة إلى الماوس event type. So we having sit on mouse pressed or released, if it's released, if it's a click, if it's entered, if it exists, if it's moved, or if it's dragged. So it's all depending on how you are moving the mouse. Sorry, okay. So a third type, so we said we having an action event, a mouse event, and now we'll talk about the key events class. Okay. The key events from its name, you will figure it out. It's care about what exactly. Okay. So we get the character, return the character associated with the key. يعني, for example, if you click the A, it's going to return the A. If you clicking AP, it's going to return whatever the user click. Okay. The second method is get the code. Return the key code associated with this event. Actually, there is some associated number. يعني مثلا الثلاثة هي الكود اللي حق الكانسل. ال8 الكود for the backspace. ال9 for tab. So this is what's the key code. Okay. Get text is going to return a string describing the key code. And the rest is similar to a mouse, and here if you press the Alt or Control, Meta or Shift. Okay. So, an additional thing, it's not a type of event. الآن راح نشوف a type of shapes. الآن تكلمنا how many types of event we describe. Can anyone remind me what's the type of event we explained? How many types we had for events? What they are? The action, the mouse, and the key. And note, if you remember, it has a lot of different, let's say, children. مثل ما أخذنا اللي هي controllers and so on. One of its child's shape. The shape also, it has the child of a child. It could be text, line, rectangle, circles, and a lot of other shapes. Let's see the first one in here, text. So text, it's a child of what? I need you to remember this, guys. A text is a child of shapes, which is a child of not. I know the name is maybe not so clear, like if someone asks you circle is a child of what, you will notice that, or you will remember it's a child of a shape. But a text, it may get you confused, not to remember it, okay? So what's an attribute inside a text? You will have a text by itself, اللي هي text اللي راح تكون موجودة. ال X وال Y, الcoordinate اللي هي المحور الثاني والصادي, ال X and ال Y, by default they're going to be 0 and 0. And the underline, if it's going to be underlined, yes or no. And then the structure, and then the font, And the one thing is you need to remember that all attributes, all those attributes, going to be private. For this reason, even if we don't mention it here, it is going to have a setter and a getter. Okay. What's the method? How many constructor we have? We have, they having also more than this as a method, but they just mention a constructor. So we having 3 constructor. Either you just create empty text, or you can create it with a specific text, or you can create it with a specific text and in a specific location. This is the main element when we having a text. So 0, 0, this is the top left. Also, it's starting with the top left, okay? 0, 0, unless you change it. Here you get the width. So from here to here is going to be width. So here X is going to be width size, and the Y is going to be 0. And here is the opposite. You're having a high for Y, and then the X is going to be 0. And for this corner here is going to be width and the high. Okay. We'll see an example, but let's finish the last part. So this is dragging a text. We will see it in NetBeans, but let's finish the slide and we'll go to NetBeans to do both examples at the same time. So then we will have a line similar to a text. It's going to have the attributes and it's going to have a constructor and a method. Here we're going to have only constructor. Either you're creating empty line, or you defined a line where it's going to start on an X and an Y, and where it's going to end. So we need to define how many arguments? 4. Let's start an X, we'll start an Y, and end an X, and then end an Y. And similar to a text, it has its own attributes, but it's different here because we need to define the start and the end for the X and the Y, and it's supposed to be double. A rectangle, we will have an X will Y. From where it's going to start, by default it's going to be 0. I need you to remember always the default value, because if you get anything for like final output, if there is no initialization or changing of the values later, you need to remember what is the default value, okay? The width and the height, it is going to be 0 as well. The arc width, what's the arc width? It is going to be 0 here for high and width. I'll show it to you now. Here, if you would like to have it with arc on the corner. To constructor, either an empty rectangle or with defining and specifying from where it's supposed to start. By default, it's going to starting from the upper left corner. Okay, and then you're going to define the width and the height. So this is the arc here. So it is going to be, for example, 2 pixels for an X and 2 for Y as well. On this example. And the last shape we're going to see is circle. A circle, doesn't have a width and height. راح يكون عندها radius اللي هي نصف القطر. In addition, we need to define where is the center. فراح نحددها ال x وال y to define where is the center for a circle. Either we're creating empty circle or defining a center only without defining what's the radius, or we define both the location with radius. So we will see the example اللي حق ال control circle. The circle we will create a code الآن إن هي راح تحتوي two buttons. One to enlarge it and one to shrink it out. Okay. So we will see the code. This is the last thing بالmeeting. So we will doing اللي هي we didn't do it اللي هي التكست example راح نشوفه الآن بالنت بينز. بالإضافة إلى الكنترولر سيركل راح نشوفها بالنت بينز and that would be the end of the meeting. بس راح نشوف and explain it absolutely. So let's start with a text. This is an example اللي حق التكست. It's called mouse. Okay. What it has, we were creating a pin, and then we will having text with a type text, and we will put inside to program is fun, and we will define the x and the y for it. We will define some other properties اللي هي الفont. So we will say what's the type of the font, and it's going to be bold, and it's Italian, and it's going to be 15s. And we also going to fill it up with Azarat. After we defined the text and we put all the properties اللي حقها, we're going to add it to what? To the pin. After we do all these graphical stuff, we have to do the handler to take the action. إيش هي اللي راح نعملها؟ إيش هي الأكشن أو إيش هي registration methods that is going to do the action we are looking for? Is sit on the mouse drag. إيش هذا تعمل؟ حسب حركة الماوس it is going to move التكست في مكان الإكس والواي اللي يتحرك فيها الماوس. Okay. So those are اللي هي creating a scene with stages as what we learned with men. So let's see what we get for this program. So programming is fun. You see, it's follow. This is the type. It's going to be bold, Italian. I have no idea, Regina, about this question. You can expect any information from the slide to come on the final. And then you having a color as a red. So what's going to happen now? If I click it, drag it, it is going to move on the place I'm moving it. So a text here, you see text that sits the X. So I'm going to set the X as the place is going to get it from an E get text. فين المكان اللي يكون فيها الماوس the text going to follow it and have the same X and Y location. Okay, this is a text example. And the last example is a circle. Okay, just changed for a bit of name. So this is a circle example. اللي هي last example here. اللي هي controller circle. The controller circle will create a flow panes. So it's going to be going one next each other. We set the V gap to 70. And then we're going to create a shape which is a circle. How many arguments do we have here? So 100, 150. What are those represent? Anyone remember? Do you remember الconstructor اللي حق الcircle? It's a 3 argument for what, Qadir? Exactly, some x, y, and a radius. And we defined it's going to be الحدود اللي حقها it's going to be black and it's going to fill as a yellow. After we define a circle, we have to add it to what? To 10. We're going to create. This is to deal the first pane اللي هي flow panes to deal with to store a circle. Then we create another pane to store the buttons, which is the BT, the enlarge to make it larger and to shrink it. Okay. ال H box spacing معناها ان هي بين البوتنز الاولى والثانيه. The spacing is going to be 10. Spacing from which where? Anyone remember? لما نقول spacing هل راح يكون في الهوريزونتال ولا الفيرتيكال؟ السبيسنج اللي هي 10 بكسل راح تكون between البوتنز اللي هي الانلارج والشرينك is going to be 10. أنا الهوريزونتال ولا الفيرتيكال؟ Why, Isan? Okay, good. So Isan said horizontal, Lujan vertical. Why? Okay, I'll tell you. In each box, that means it's going to be in horizontal. The spacing اللي حقها is going to be horizontal. We don't use vertical gen. In each box horizontal. That means horizontal يعني buttons one is going to go next to each other in a horizontal way. So that means spacing it's in each space. If we have in the V box, the spacing it's mean the V space will V gap. في الفلو كنا نحدد ان هي راح تكون ال H gap او ال V gap لان it could be horizontal or it could be vertical. But with the H box, because it's already horizontal, so the spacing mean ال H gap هي المسافة بينهم بال H gap. Okay? After we define them, we're going to add them to the pen. And then we're going to just organize the nodes more using the board pen to put circle في الcenter وال H box that is including البوتنز الأولى والثانية اللي هي enlarge and shrink. It is going to be where at the bottom. Okay. What's the handler is going to do? Yani when we click the enlarge, what we going to do? We will call a what's the name of a registration method here? Can anyone extract a registration method from those sentences? إيش هي registration method? What is the registration method? Yes, a set on action. So a set on action is a registration method, and we're using a third way to define a handler. So we'll do circle, which is the shape that we defined here. That sets a radius We already get the radius. How much is the radius? We have how much a radius at the beginning? $50, right. So with every click on enlarge راح يكون الراديوس first time 52, next time 54, third time is going to be 56, and so on. In the opposite, when we click the shrink, we will get a radius. A radius is going to decrease by 2. So let's see what we're going to get here. This is the scene and the stage as what we explained. So let's see results. So this is a circle. You see it has a board as a block, filled as a yellow. So if I click enlarge, it's going to get larger each time with the 2 pixels. Okay? And if I click shrink, it's going to shrink by 2 every time I click the shrink. Okay? So any question about the examples or anything? So this is the end of today's class. Thank you for attending and listening. I know you're getting tired at the end of the semester.